Everyone dreams of living an uncommon life, and the best asset you have to achieve your dreams is you. Welcome to the Uncommon Wealth Podcast. We're going to introduce you to people who are living uncommonly. We're also going to give you some tools and strategies for building wealth and for pursuing an uncommon path that is uniquely right for you.
Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Uncommon Wealth Podcast, where I'm your host, Philip Ramsey.
And I'm Aaron Kramer.
Thanks for tuning in. We're super excited. We've been going on this series, I would say, just about like your mindset with money, and super grateful to be able to be working in this industry for it's almost over 12 years, but let's just say over 10 years, and kind of getting our own philosophy after having that experience in 10 years. That's something that, when I first got into the industry, they're like, hey, get gray hair and then you can manage my money. Yeah. Well, I got gray hair and we're still managing people's money, but there is some kind of experience that happens that you just start understanding the way people think, the way that the overarching population thinks about money. And so this is kind of our feeble attempt to try to figure out and try to communicate what we've seen in the past. This is the second series. We've been kind of going on this thing for a while, and I think we're going to do it for a couple times more. So we have 3 topics that we're going to talk about today. And then we're just going to close it up, but hopefully this gives you an understanding of how you think about money, or maybe just an understanding of how we think about money. So Aaron, how are you doing, man?
Dude, I'm doing good. I'm excited for this. That was a great intro to this. Good job on that. I like our first one we're going to go over.
Yeah. Let's give them all the topics, and then we'll kind of dissect each one of them.
So, first topic, we're going to go through the importance of like compounding.
Yeah. The 7th wonder of the world, or what is it? The 8th wonder of the world, compounding.
Yeah. And then getting wealthy versus staying wealthy.
Okay. So like getting or accumulating is different than actually having the money and then trying to keep it going after you're wealthy. Okay. That's the second topic. Third topic is,
just tell you flip a coin, which side makes you a winner? Okay. So like win. the odds of making money or keeping money or making wealth. Is that kind of the third topic? Like big ideas.
Okay. Big ideas in money, especially with the Uncommon Wealth brand. We have a lot of people who come and is like, hey, I got a really good idea. Sometimes those ideas are great. Sometimes they're not. And so kind of working through that. One thing that we will say early on is we're financial advisors. We love to put emphasis on a financial plan. That financial plan has to be around your core values, the way that you're wired, the way you get excited. And so I don't have an elevator pitch. I just don't. I don't love them. I hate when people have a canned response. But when somebody asks me, like, what do I do? Usually it depends on what mood I'm in, right? But I have been saying, like, I help people get excited about their money again. And like, that's interesting. Like, because I feel like that's what we do at Uncommon Wealth Partners. And so here we go. The first topic is the compounding effect. And something that I think Tony Robbins says in his book about investing is basically, I wish I would have just put it in the S&P 500. And like, I have a couple of issues with that, but his whole overarching theme of this book, it's super long too, by the way, is I just wish I would have put it in the S&P 500 or a low cost ETF and let this thing ride. And I would say, okay, I understand where he's coming from, but the experience that he had about all the things, the ventures that happened that maybe weren't successful, made Tony Robbins who he is today. And if he would have just put all his money in the S&P, we never would have gotten the wisdom out of him, because I think there's really good stuff. But he couldn't have impacted the world like he did. And so to me, I'm like, okay, great. I understand what you're saying about compounding. It's powerful. But how can you continue to be Tony Robbins while also investing? That's kind of the thought, right?
The fun fact on the S&P 500, this is a total sidebar, but like, I just saw a study on this. If you would have just invested in the S&P 500, it was over a certain period of time, long period of time, like 30 years or something, your actual return would have only been 4% on your money.
Oh, interesting.
After inflation and everything like that, and then like coming back from the dips and stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't take those numbers to the bank.
Okay. I won't.
But it was like something you're like, oh wow, that's not as much as you thought it was.
Right. And I think you said something there that's important to point out. One, that when you just look over the growth of the S&P in the past, I don't know, let's say 30 years, the thing that you probably don't think about is inflation and fees that you're paying in order to be in that S&P fund. Now, if you're just doing it by yourself and you're just putting it in a low cost ETF, that's one thing. But if you have advisors, that's a different thing, right? And so those two things you have to factor into the overarching like rate of return for the S&P or anything like that. So that's something to think about. But there is something that's powerful about compounding.
Oh my gosh, it's so cool.
It's so cool, but it's not easy. It's easy and it's not easy. There's something psychologically about like, it's so easy, it's not easy. And one of the biggest things about, this whole compounding effect is letting your money continue to grow even when it's dropping. Yep. And I would say to complement that, we call it dollar cost averaging. That's what the industry calls it. But it's like contributing and continuing to contribute when the market is down is super important for compounding.
Yeah.
And so,
and they say that, like, I think it's Warren Buffett says, like, our brains have a really hard time just even comprehending the power of compounding.
Yes, that's right.
But
and because it's like a linear, like a bell curve, it like goes straight up. And so the beginning, it's not that powerful, but at the end, it is super powerful. And it exponentially grows when it starts to compound.
It wasn't, they say like Warren Buffett's wealth, the majority of his wealth was earned after he retired or something like that?
After 65. Yeah. And I think everybody focuses on, Warren Buffett as like the epitome of an investor. And he would say that the biggest thing that has made him successful is just time.
Yes.
He just did it early on and he kept doing it. And but he would say like even some of the investments that he thought were great, like they weren't, but he just kept going.
Yeah. And I think that's the secret sauce to compounding is like time. You can't get the power of compounding in 5 years, 1 year. Like it doesn't work that way. It's like anything. Compounding, it's over time that really builds up.
Yep. It really does. And so you can do the numbers in your head. We can show you the numbers, but there's something psychologically about staying in the pocket, continuing to do the thing that you know you need to do, all while you're still pursuing what you want to do and getting excited about that. So I think it's a compliment back to old Tony Robbins. There's a compliment of pursuing both. There's going to be things that you're going to be learning if you try to do your own business or start pursuing what you're passionate about. There are inherent lessons that will come to head, and you're going to learn them a lot better than putting your money into the market. But they're two different, I would say, skills that you have to learn. And that's what we're here at Uncommon Wealth. How do you mirror the two? How do we continue to grow? So at the end of the rainbow, you're not like Tony Robbins and say, oh, I wish I would have done this. But you're excited about the path that you're on, and you have, this compounding effect because it's powerful and it's important.
It's super important. And not to muddy the waters here, but like compounding is important in money and then just in life. Because if you're starting a business, you're chasing that path, you're going to have failures, you're going to have bumps in the road, and you got to keep growing. And if you keep building your skills upon your skills, that's compounding. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, and it's the time that you get discouraged and you don't do it is when you don't get the effects of what you've just went through. So that's actually a really good point. So good job, Aaron. There you go. Thanks. I had a good idea. They're around every once in a while.
You always have good ideas. Okay. Second point is let's get it going. Come on, staying wealthy versus staying wealthy. Yeah, right. Or you got it.
Whatever you want, like getting money, like building wealth versus like keeping your wealth.
It's a totally different deal. And it's a different mindset. We've seen it countless of times here at Uncommon Wealth.
Yeah.
Accruing wealth, sometimes you just keep doing it. Maybe it's hard to do it. Sometimes it doesn't feel like you should, but you keep doing it. And eventually it ends up amassing normally to a considerable amount of wealth. Okay. The point that I think to emphasize this, and I'm sure that we can probably put this in the show notes or something, but it's a graph on accumulating wealth versus the income side of wealth. And it shows like no matter what the rate of return is, it can be completely opposite. So you can have -12, +5, or whatever the market returns. You can flip that completely backwards. And at the end of the day, have a similar number at the bottom of it because you're accumulating wealth. So we all know the market's going to go up. We all know the market's going to go down. So if you continue to just kind of take the guesswork out of it, continue to invest, chances are you're going to have the same amount of money no matter what the rate of return is and how the sequence of returns happen. So let's just talk about that's accumulating wealth. Okay. But when we talk about distribution of wealth, the rate of return and the sequence of return matters so much more. Yep. Now, that's a small part of what we're talking about, but that is still important. And so it depends on whether you're accumulating wealth or you're starting to live off the wealth that you have accumulated. The rate of return is actually super important, more so on the distribution side, the time when you're taking money out.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a little bit of an example of accumulating wealth versus like staying wealthy.
Another way to think about it more on the psychology side of things is like we see a lot in our practice, since we have a lot of people going what we call uncommon. You know, and once they've hit success at their uncommon, they get a lot of confidence in building wealth because they found out how valuable they are themselves. Like I can just go make more money.
Yes.
But when you get into retirement and you're no longer building anything, now the wealth that you have built is very like it's a different shift in mindset because you can't just go make more money because you're done. You're done earning and building. Now you have to live off of what you have. And so like you can't be like, oh, I just want to go buy a yacht and I'll just earn more next year. Like you can't out earn that yacht. Like the market, you're depending on one thing to out earn that, and that's the market, not you and the market and things like that.
That's right. So that's why I think it's good that we're on this uncommon path because we try to encourage people to start figuring out what you're passionate about early before you retire. And if you get lucky enough to try to monetize that passion, it's going to make retirement a lot smoother. Here's what I mean. Like when you're first accumulating wealth in your career, you're just putting money maybe in your 401k, you're saving it monthly. Eventually, you have to go to now living off of your money. And that's a scary transaction. When somebody's been like, I've worked my whole life and I've put money in it. Now I'm not working at all. And I'm hoping that I'm going to have enough money tomorrow. It's just a scary proposition versus the people that do uncommon things and start getting paid as they are working. They're starting to work their uncommon passion, let's call it, and they're starting to get paid for it. So even when they retire, maybe they can put more time and effort into that passion, which would then maybe make more money, right?
Yeah.
And so they have a little bit more of a comfortability of like, hey, I love what I do. I get to do it every day. And people keep paying me. And it feels a lot like they used to be back in the day where somebody was giving them a paycheck. So the people that are just completely stopped working and now they're living off their money, there is a bigger emphasis on like, well, how's my account doing? Is it going down? Is it going up? Yeah. And there's a little bit of a scarcity mindset when that happens, when you don't have anything else to focus on.
Yeah. I think that's where like they call it like this like barbelled personality kind of thing.
Oh, that's good.
Or you gotta stay optimistic about the future and all things. But it is good to have a little bit of that like paranoia or be paranoid about what will prevent you from getting to the future, like of the unknown.
Yep.
But like you gotta like stick to like, the known should give you that confidence and stuff. Because the last thing you want is as soon as you start getting overly scared, like your frontal lobe shuts down.
Yeah, you start making irrational thoughts, irrational decisions. Okay, here's another thing too that we've seen a lot. Because the advice, I shouldn't say it, because we have awesome people, awesome clients.
Yeah, we do. At
times, they will sell their business. And that can be a lot of money. Yeah. That can be a very successful transaction.
Life-changing events.
Life-changing. And in that could come with a pretty big pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, those people are looking at their money and maintaining that wealth is now a whole different mindset. to continue to push the envelope, whether you're putting it in investments that could grow or have volatility, whatever, there is a different mindset of like, okay, now I need to grow or keep this wealth. So that's something that you just need to know is different. And so when people get that kind of money dropped in their bank account, that's normal to think, okay, now what? Now we need to maintain.
Help listeners. If you're not in this boat, if you've been in this boat, listeners, then you can ignore this part. But like for the listeners that are like, oh, I think I got it. The simplest way I find to like really like be able to relate to this is take that big number, like throw out a number, Philip.
10 million.
10 million. Look at what a 10% swing to that money does.
$1 million.
Like
million up, million down.
Yeah, like so up's like, oh, that's amazing. That's why compounding is beautiful, right?
Yeah.
But down, you're like, oh my gosh, I just lost what? I wasn't even making that a year.
That's right. Okay.
But 10% down in a $10,000 portfolio or even a $100,000 portfolio, 10% down, you're like, that's not, I make more than that a month,
Mm-hmm. Right.
So like it changes your perspective completely when that big number, like the swings are bigger. And so like that's way more emotional than ever before.
So that's why we would say the financial plan is so important, because then you'd be able to see like, well, can I still make it if there's a 10% swing? Those kind of things. We would put a lot more emphasis on the plan. So now we're going to go to like the bigger investments that you can make. And can you be wrong, right? And still make it in the day. But that's
also not focusing in on them too.
Yeah. So I would say one of the biggest reasons why I am who I am today is not because of the successes I've had in my past, but because of the failures. So if you think about that, would you have gone through the failures and the trials again? Chances are you would probably honestly say, no, I don't want to do that. But you know that those trials have produced something in you that you couldn't have learned otherwise if things were always rosy and peachy.
Yeah. So we had on one of our other podcasts, now I don't know when it's going to get released or if it's already been released, but we got to interview my uncle. And he's very successful. And we asked him a question about his failure, like what he would change. And it was like nothing. Because failures give you so much.
Right. And then in then the same podcast, he ends up saying like, I want to answer that again, which I loved. I appreciated. But I honestly liked the first part of the answer. Yeah. I wouldn't change anything because even the failures have produced something in me that I think I value. Yeah. But so let's talk about just investing in general. And we've talked about this at the beginning when we talk about compounding is Warren Buffett, like he would say, many of his investments that he put his money into were not a success. Yet we all know who Warren Buffett is and he's fairly successful. So we would probably say like, what, how can you even say that? And the point is that there's times where you make an investment, it doesn't go well. That doesn't mean your whole plan is throw it away. It's bad. It's just like, no, that one investment went bad. Okay. Now, the other thing that I would say about this is big decisions are important. And that's why we like to make a plan for people. Sometimes those plans change. For example, I have a buddy that potentially could be changing jobs, and that job is paying less than what his current job is. And so when he kind of called me and he was like talking through this, I was like, well, let me pull up your plan and let me punch in the new number of what you could be making. And we can kind of in numbers take the emotions out of it and see if you're going to be okay. Right. Yeah. What we found is he'd have to work probably 1 or 2 years more in order to have the same success as his other job, paying higher. But then that was a decision him and his wife could talk through. Yeah. Hey, is this change that important for us to work 1 or 2 years more? And he's leaning towards yes. So kind of exciting to be able to be a part of that, of like, hey, enjoy your day every day more than you did yesterday. And if that means make a change, but it's a monetarily back step, is that going to change your plan? But that's a big decision, right? And I was super grateful to be a part of that. 1, because I'm his friend. 2, I'm a financial advisor, which also it makes an impact on what we're dealing with. So yeah,
I love the fact that like you will be able to like take the numbers so he can digest that and his wife can digest that, but then like really get into the nitty gritty of like the emotional, like, yeah, I got to work 2 years longer, but maybe, I don't know, I wasn't in this conversation, but maybe it's like my quality of life will go up because my job stress goes way down. And so it's like,
sure,
totally for 2 more years because my quality of life in the time span of retirement will be way better.
It's good. It's good. Okay. So I also think like you said about the barbell approach. I think that's applicable to this.
Yeah.
So walk the listeners through what the barbell approach is.
So being optimistic, but being aware of like your risks, really,
Yep.
right?
So I would say like have just steady things that are in your portfolio, and then just make sure those are consistent. And then you can then on the other side, maybe make, on 5% of your portfolio, like hey, I hope this works.
Yeah.
If it goes to 0, it's okay too. But
right. So like, that's kind of like, so I'm a meathead, so this analogy might not work for everybody.
It's a barbell. So you're going to talk about it,
Yeah, I'm going to talk about it. It's a perfect analogy. So for the word, but anyways, if you got a bar up on a squat rack, and it's empty, pretty much how much weight can you put on one side before that bar just flips over? Right.
Okay.
Let's keep it even. Like you have to be aware, let's be optimistic and let's go after fun, big things. But you can't stack 4, 5 45-pound plates on one side and not put anything on the other side. It's going to flip.
Lopsided.
But sometimes it does take only a 25 or 145 on the other side of that being like a little paranoid, being a little cautious, understanding the risk, to help make sure the bar doesn't flip.
It's good. Right. I like it. Okay, good.
But I mean, I think that also the other big portion about this win thing that we got to touch base on is like everyone follows these big winners. Like, oh, this person did this. Let's do that. It's like, don't always be chasing the big winners because if most of the time, I know like we've talked about this before, it's common, but if you're hearing about it, like most
Could be
likely,
too late.
Yeah, it's too late. So, but there's something to be learned from it. Not saying that, but jumping on the bandwagon, it's probably over.
It's good. All right. So in this podcast, I think the 3 things that we really were talking about is just the power of compounding, plain and simple. How do you do that? It's a system over time. Take the emotion out of it. Continue to dollar cost average. Deal. The other thing is just when you're accumulating, a different mindset on once you have wealth. And then also the systematic rate of return is important, more important on the distribution side of things. And then the last thing is like what are you chasing after? What big things what is in your portfolio? What is it in your life? And then how does that affect your overall plan? Those are important to talk through. Yeah. Those are my small, would you recap that in any other way?
No, I think I mean, compound's super powerful. Out of the 3, I feel like hopefully that's what you'll take away most there.
Okay.
Compounding in your life and in your portfolio, both.
Yeah.
And then, like the differences of building wealth versus keeping your wealth and being diligent about your wins.
Diligent. I love that word. It's my word of the year. Okay. You've been listening to Uncommon Wealth Podcast. If you ever have any questions, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@uncommonwealth.com. Let us know your thoughts, what you want to hear, if this was helpful. A lot of times, Aaron and I don't know who's listening to this. Obviously, we get statistics twice a month, I get, or once a month.
We just like talking to one another.
Yeah, we kind of do. We kind of geek out about this stuff. So we hopefully this is valuable to you. Thanks for being a listener. Thanks for being on the Uncommon bandwagon. We appreciate you. Until next time, go be uncommon.
That's all for this episode, brought to you by Uncommon Wealth Partners. Be sure to visit uncommonwealth.com to learn more about our services. Don't miss an episode as we introduce you to inspiring people who are actively pursuing an uncommon life.